welcome Sunny Kabrawala for this podcast, founder and director of the Space Technology and Aeronautical Rocketry, and the person who taught me education of the soul is much more important than educating for the degree. Because through his TED Talks, he has really given me that immense opportunity of learning what can space technology be. Space is much more accessible. That's what all his TED Talks or anywhere, any talks which he gives says to you this. Space is actually accessible. It gives me an immense pleasure to do a podcast with Sunny Kabrawala because to me, he has been that virtual guide in the space technology who has really taught me that there's no reason to just say this space technology is complex or space technology is much of a science. It's all about that hustle which you have to get in. Thank you, Sunny Kabrawala, sir, for giving me this podcast.
Thank you so much, Vishwas. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm really excited and looking forward to having good questions from you.
Sure, sir. Question, sir. You're not just given a TikTok. You're just given something that is more phenomenal for the world. You also showed how communities have been working day and night in order to give such kind of an enthusiastic approach in order to solve the space problems. So now I just want to ask you this one question. What's the thrill of working in a space technology as a human being? There are people who have been working day and night as as a normal scientist who are bound to do that work, but has an lemonade hustle, has an hustle outside of what your reach is. As an open source person, how was that thrill of doing this in the space?
So, as you rightly mentioned, that people, the scientists who work, no matter in what domain, they work for day and night, and we have heard this that they spend like most of the time of their life in doing some research or doing some work which is uncertain, and they even are not aware about what is going to be the end result. Sometimes what you do is you invest your whole life in a research. You put a good amount of money, not always your money, but government's money into in building big machines, but then you don't find or discover the thing that you expected to discover. The only thing that drives these scientists is the curiosity to know and to discover new things. And the scientists are not always, you know, driven by the output or the outcome of anything. They are just driven by the right process. They just focus on whatever things they're doing. They just focus on the process that they're building in order to get the end result. So having good curiosity is very important. I heard somewhere, I just saw a video on internet. Uh, so Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know how many of you know, but Neil deGrasse Tyson, he asked a small girl that, "What do you want to become when you grow up?" That girl said that, "I want to become a scientist when I grow up." Then Neil deGrasse Tyson, he replied that, a good thing about being a scientist is you don't need to grow up. It's all about, if I ask you a very simple question, what after pursuing what degree you will be called scientist. There's no specific degree for to be pursued in order to call yourself a scientist, right? Scientist is a person who just focus on the process, who is driven by curiosity to discover various things and to experiment different what anything which is based on engineering, which can be based on theory as well. So that is what they are always excited for, and that is why we have heard that they are often, like, I'm not talking all these scientists, but they are often isolated from the actual world or the social world. They are mainly focusing on the work they do. They are mainly focusing on getting the process done and the work done, and just curious to know that what will be the end result of the process now.
Of this curiosity, right? There is a lot of new things which the space technology has seen in the past decade. When I speak of space technology 2010, before it was just the rocket with an engine with nothing else. But today there's an involvement of algorithms. What do you feel about these kind of research which is going to be the next disruption? And also, can you point out to me some of those techniques which you are involved in your life in order to get the work done, not in terms of whether it's space, whether it's in terms of management, anything? What's that hack that you have really followed and which has really worked in your life?
Sure. So I'll answer in two different parts. The first one is, the various domains which are coming up within the sector right now. So before, like, if you see the history of space technology, it got started with an intention of competition between two different countries. And then there was this time where countries used to build things for exploration, like building spacecraft to send them you know to Mars, to around Jupiter, and even beyond the solar system. And now, if you see, then space is open for business. Now, people are making space based products, not just to explore, but even to expand humanity to different planets. In that case, we have got many opportunities now. Like, one example is, if you have to go to Mars, right, you have to carry a lot of goods with you, a lot of mechanical tools, right, and that will increase the weight of the rocket, and that will, for that you need more fuel, and then your mission budget will increase. Instead, what if you carry just a 3D printer, and if you make all mechanical tools there using 3D printing technique by using the Martian soil, right? So you don't need to carry everything, you just carry a one machine, and then you'll be able to manufacture things there. You can also manufacture your home on Mars, right? So there are companies who are focusing on building domes on Mars now. There are people who are focusing on making miniature rovers which can help astronauts or space travelers on Mars or any other planet to explore the planet when they are there. So they don't need to enter or get down into the craters. They can send these rovers and they can get the data there, right? So now opportunities are there. Uh, there was a time when space systems were only built by government, and then came the time in the private companies. But now space have reached the classrooms. We have heard many a times that students have built a satellite and they have launched satellite to space. No matter what the purpose is going to be, just to click a Earth picture, or it can be to get some small data from a satellite. But at least now they are able to experiment something that they have built in space, right? So the thing is, space have successfully reached to the classrooms, and now there will be a time after 5 years you'll be seeing a lot of student space satellites going to space, right? So that is one more good thing. I like, recently we collaborated with a company in the pandemic that they are planning to have the satellites in space, which are going to be blank satellites. And students, if they want to perform experiments, they don't need to build a satellite and send it to space. They can directly upload their software in the satellites which are launched by that company, and they can get an orbit for a rent. So for one orbital period, they can perform an experiment by just uploading their own software. And then if everything works well, they in future they can build their own satellites and launch them in space. So before launching an actual satellite, you can perform a simulation of all the operations setting on the Earth. So that was the thing. And the two basics, the hacks that I follow every time in all my operation is, first is to keep things simple. We don't need to complicate things, right? And we have seen that people, what they do is, they believe that if they are doing something, if they show or reflect that their work is really complicated or difficult, people will admire them. But that is not the right thing. As a teacher, you have to simplify things for others. And I always say that a teacher has to be a good communicator first, and that is where you can take the attention of people, right? So keep things very much simple and don't try to complicate things. And the second is, the solution for all the advanced problem lies at the fundamental level of that problem. Sometimes we get stuck at the point which we feel that this is very much complicated to understand, very much complex. But if you understand the basics and the fundamental, more you work on basics, it will be easier for you to solve the complex problems as well. So focus. When I was in school, the one thing I did wrong with physics is I didn't focus on it on basics. I jumped to the advanced problem, and that is why I was not able to understand physics at that time. Later on, I worked on my basics, and now I can understand physics better than before. So these are the two hacks which I usually share with students: keep things simple and be strong with basics and fundamentals.
Yeah, speaking of this thing called as fundamentals, we are adamant to the facts that what fundamentals can really do today. Because the same law of gravity, the same law of everything, let it be momentum, Newton's law, still applicable in the same fashion. Just like how A, B, C, D to Z has never changed, these laws have just been stagnant. People are working on that. But like, when you just told about the basics, right? I just want to ask you this one question: what has math been that influence in your life today? mathematics? What's that actual influence that is it has got in your life today?
So to be honest, I was not so good at math uh, during my school time. I hate mathematics, but later on I realized that like everything which is there in the physical world has to be represented in the form of equations. That is mathematics. So what I did was that again worked on the basics of mathematics, where I was able to understand, replicate everything which was there in the physical world in the form of mathematical equations. And I used to like I don't write equations on my own, but I like, to understand the equations which are formed, which are derived by some XYZ person. So that is how I created a habit of understanding equations. So if today I see an equation, I can easily figure it out, that what are the variables which are affecting a particular system at a great scale, and what are the variables which are not at all affecting the system. And if you don't consider those variables, the system will still have got a very miniature minimum deviations. So based on the logics, was able to understand mathematics in a better way. And still not so good at mathematics, but able to understand the equations which are there, and I can relate to different things. If especially if you are there, I don't know whether you are much aware about the quantum mechanics and the astrophysics which goes on. You can relate to different things if you are good at mathematics, and you can try to understand the nature of any particle which is there in the quantum world or in the actual world, that not the actual world, but at our scale at least, right? So it becomes easier if you understand mathematics. It becomes easier to understand the nature of anything, uh, and uh, and to understand that those particular things are dependent on what and in what ways. So mathematics helps you in understanding those things.
When you told about it's just in the form of an equation that you build the entire world in a form of an equation. Let it be an x, y, z variables. These variables talk. But
True.
now, when space exploration is in such a way that it started out by we are trying to understanding how the human being had their origin from. A lot of theories like Big Bang, everything come. You know, I would just want to ask you this one question: will understanding the space give the rise to understanding the history of human life? Is it really worth the money that we are spending today? Or else the companies which are putting in the billions and billions of dollars which the venture capitalists give, is it really worth it? And also there are space miners who have really come up today. They say you can gift your wife a piece of a moon, kind of, lot of things. What's that still actually giving these people in order to put in so much money in order to get these answers, and the answers for those questions which were never answered before? What's that?
So gifting a piece of moon is for the people who have got wives. Like it's not a purpose for the people like me or the people who are single. The thing is, like if we actually see the community, space community, they work in two different domains right now. Like, one is the set of people who are figuring out how things were formed or how things were there before all these happened. And then on the second side, we have a set of people who are focusing on expanding humanity on other planets. So one is focusing on building future, and second one is focusing on understanding the things which are there in past, right? And both are important, because if you see history based on that, what you can do is you can predict what is going to happen next, and based on that you can build future, right? And it's very important, because on earth everything is driven by humans, but in the world, in the universe, everything is driven by physics, right? So we need to understand what physics, like how physics actually came into existence, and what is going to happen next. And based on that, we can build the future human-based civilizations on other planets. And that is why I consider investing right amount in both different domain is important. I often say in my talk that Earth is Earth is going to become next Mars. The way we are using resources, it is going to become a dead planet very soon. By very soon, I don't mean that in 10 years or 100 years. It will take millions of years, but still, the way we are using resources, it is going to become a dead planet. And Mars have chances of becoming next Earth. That is a live planet. The existence of intelligent life in our solar system depends on what happens first. whether Earth is becoming the next Mars or Mars is becoming the next Earth. So we have to uh, what we have to do is we have to focus on, and it's not like imagine an asteroid coming towards you and you got to know that in 50 years it will be colliding with Earth and everything will be vanished. Now 50 years is not enough for you, for anyone to start from zero and to build a spacecraft to send humans to Mars. It takes a lot of years, right? And even you can see a lot of companies are right now working, still it's taking a much of time, right? So the thing is, we need to start working from right now in order to build future civilizations on other planets. And that is why I feel it's worth. And if you just forget about future and past, if we talk about present, we use GPS, we use weather forecast based data which is acquired from satellite. We are doing this podcast right now, right, which is based on the internet that we get from satellites, right? So we use satellites data in day to day life as well. So why not to invest money in things, right, which is making life easier for us? I know we are creating a lot of debris out there, that is another picture, but still investing right amount uh, in discovering what was there before and what are the opportunities for us in future for expansion, it's important.
Oh, because when you told about a lot of things, right? I just want to go back to the mathematics question, and I just want to ask you this one question: what is statistics have the real meaning in the space industry to you? What is statistics all about to you? That's what I really mean to, because you're involved in money, you're involved in the probability of getting the things done, you're involved with the mathematics behind the cost and also the deployment. Cheaper your deployments are, companies are going to come to you and they're just going to give you much more tenders in order to give you a bright project for the space technology. But what is statistics according to you? Because when I ask all the deep learning, machine learning scientists, they say it in a different way. It's just an insight of the data. But what is statistics according to you?
Very important question. There's a couple of years back, I was not the person who used to deal with figures and statistics. I was a very random person focusing on the operations and working in a way that an entrepreneur works in the initial days. But if I answer this with two different perspectives, like as an engineer and as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, so let me first get into the engineering side. Statistics is a very important thing because if you have got a process which was already been done before by many people, and if you equation is nothing but it will give you a set of data which in the end becomes a statistics. So if I tell you that speed equals to distance upon time, and if I keep distance stationary every time, a constant value, if I keep on varying time, you'll get a set of data, right, for that particular value. So that becomes a statistics for you, and based on statistics I can predict that where were you located or what was your speed at this particular distance, right? So in that engineering, the statistics is a very crucial thing, and when you collect a lot of data, that can help you in figuring out what are the errors in the signal, and how can you solve it, right? So if you see, then the best solvers are not the people who understand engineering in the better way, but they are people who understand the pattern in the better way. And that is why if I don't contact a mechanical engineer, we go to mechanics. They understand the pattern of the problem which is there, and based on the pattern they can understand that this is the problem that lies in this system and we need to get it changed, right? So understanding the right pattern is very important in solving the problem, and that is where when that happens when you have got a lot of data and statistics. If you see in the entrepreneur side, you'll find a lot of founders and entrepreneurs telling you that statistics is the most important thing. You should know that how big is your market, what is your target audience, what is the set of customers you're targeting, what was the growth of the economy. But as per my mindset or thought, statistics in business is just a mindset. It matters. I won't say that it doesn't matter. It's like, if I ask you that you have to sell the flavored ice in Antarctica, you won't be able to sell there, right? Because that's not the right market for you, and that's not because number of people the living there is less, but just because the environment, it's already cool there, you cannot sell a flavored ice there, right? So it has nothing to do with the statistics. An entrepreneur, it plays a mind game. So what happens, like for example, if you as a founder found that this year you made 100% growth in compared to the last year performance, financial growth, that will help you to set the target for the next year. You'll feel that next year I need at least 120%, 130% of the growth, right? And now if you set a target of 120%, and if you don't reach 120 and still you'll be able to reach 110 or 105, you'll be happy because you are still better than the previous year. So statistics is all about, mind thing. And when you're operating, to be honest, you don't keep statistics in mind. Like for example, if you approach me as a student, I want to learn rocket science, I won't think that how much he be able to pay to me. And this month I was supposed to reach out to 100 students. I've already done 100 students, and this is one of the extra students I have to teach. I won't do it. I will pass him to the another month, so that I can achieve my target for the next month as well. No, I won't keep statistics in my mind. The only thing while I'm working or operating, I keep in mind is more students we need to reach and help, right? Whether they are able to pay us or not. We have got scholarship programs also for students. So if they are not able to pay, that's fine. But the intention is just to serve them. That's it. So while we are even testing the members' performance, we don't keep statistics in mind. It's all about the way they work and the way they are maintaining the ethics and principles of the company. Is important.
Yeah, when you talked about this ethics and a lot of new ways in which students are getting involved to your scholarship program or anything, leaving all that to side, there is a lot of hype which has been created AI in the space industry. There has been a TF Lite, which Google announced with the ARM compatibility, which is saying that it can be used in a satellite system in order to get the maneuvers, onboard autonomy, kind of. There's a lot of hype which AI on the space system is. What's your view on this hype which is going on? It's obviously been deployed in the satellites. Already spaceships are also having sensor fusion, a lot of algorithms inside it. What's this hype all about? What can it do to the space industry? That's what I'm asking you.
So the thing is, like, I've heard many times that AI is not good for humans. Like it can destroy humans in future and all. Like keeping everything aside right now, but AI is basically nothing but you have got some data, which you have gathered for a long amount of time. You you have a ability to to identify the pattern by its own. Like the system have the ability to identify its pattern by its own. That is what we call machine learning as well, right? And based on that, what you do is you take a decision in the end, right? So till now humans had that interference and taking decisions while performing such maneuvers, or for protecting the satellite or the rover on any other planet. The artificial intelligence, once implemented in these systems, will give that flexibility to the system itself to take that decision to keep it safe. And that is the only intention we have got right now. We have got no other intentions that these robots or these rovers will carry forward some extreme operations which can even harm humans. That is not going to be there right now. The only purpose right now to use artificial in space is to protect the system itself, without having any human interference, because it takes 20 minutes for a signal to reach to Mars. And if something happens there, and if I have to send a signal in 20 minutes, anything can happen. But what if your system itself have the capability to take that decision? So it's like when you are 16-year-old, your parents helps you in taking decisions, but in future you have to take your own decision. So for 16 years you understand the pattern, with which your parents used to take the decisions, and now based on that you'll take the future decision. And that is why every kid is different, right? And that is why we say that we learn from our parents first. They are like, home is the first school, right? So if you see your parents are really good at financial management, the kid will also be better in the financial management, because he have seen his parents. If you see that the parents are really punctual, they're always in time in parties or in functions, you'll see that kids are also punctual in time. Why? Because we learn from parents, right? So we get those habits. And there is nothing but artificial intelligence that happened with us. Now we don't need our parents to tell us that you have to go to office at this time, right? We take our own decisions. So that is how systems are going to behave in space. Based on the previous data, they're going to take the future decisions for their own safety and security. It's very useful.
Yeah, when you told about the AI and everything, I saw the passion you have for the space industry, because when I saw your TED talk, it was not about just an open sourcing or making it more accessible or making it more student friendly. It's all about that passion which you have put in for years of work in order to get yourself that knowledge of, yes, I can be a prominent scientist today. It takes time. Whether you want to be an gymnast, whether you want to be a tennis player, whether you want to be the bodybuilder who wants to show off a six pack, it's a new level of respect. What's that respect that we need to have in order to get inside the space industry? People are more into this hype of, okay, I'm a genius in computer science, I can just program anything in a short span of time. So now space is much more accessible to me, technology is accessible to me, but space technology is a new game. What's that key word that you want to give to them, or the key note which they should really keep in their mind in order to enter the space industry? Because hustle in space industry is something which is more different than any tech. You can build a microservice, you can build anything from the scratch with your laptop, but having such kind of a deployment which is like hundreds of kilometers away from you, it takes a lot and lot of patience. It also requires you to respect that field, right? What's that one thing that you really want our younger generations to literally take in? That's my
So
question.
the one key thing that helps me out is always to be open for new learnings or adaptability. If I have to name it in one word, adaptability is a very important thing, because you know the world is changing very fast. Like a lot of new things uh, are coming into the market. Like you can, if you just see, then every other day there is one new company which is coming up with a very new concept of building products, or it can be an innovation into the product or service or in the process itself, but something is new in that case as well. So one have to be ready to learn things, and that is important. And one myth that every student have got is, once they feel that to enter any industry or any domain, they need to be expert of that particular domain. First you have to enter, and then you become an expert. So that is like, if I have to compare this with something, then it can be an example of swimming. You cannot learn swimming by watching videos on internet or YouTube. You have to get into the water with all safety and precautions initially, and then you keep practicing that, and one day you will be a good swimmer. So you need to be there in the market. It's not that if you learn all the techniques offline, or by just watching videos, and then you'll enter the water and then you'll be able to swim. No, you have to hustle. You have to face some challenges, and then if you overcome those challenges, you will be able to define a good technique to swim, and that is how you will be able to sustain in the water. In similar way, students, they think that I'll do my bachelor's, and afterwards I'll do my master's, I'll get much knowledge, and then I'll work for a few companies, and then I'll start my own company. I'll get an experience, then I'll do that, which is a very wrong method, which it never works, right? It's like, if you're really passionate to start working for a company with a great vision, or if you want to start your own company with a great vision, you'll do it right now. You won't wait for it. It's like, you have got a very strong crush on a girl, and you're just waiting for you to get six packs, to look good, and then to go and propose. It's not going to work, right? Someone else will come and will take that girl. So if you really love that person, you'll gather that courage and you'll propose her, right? And that is how things work. So in similar way, getting all the expertise is not, it's not even I like yesterday I had a session with students, and they asked me a few questions which I was not able to answer, even after having so much experience of working on small scale rockets, and going through YouTube videos and reading about rockets since childhood. I was not able to answer that. The reason is, that was something which I never came across before. The students asked me. So students, the generation is really growing fast, and they have got access to such resources from where they can get information about advanced technologies. So when they ask questions, what you could, so at that point I didn't have answers. So what I did was, I just told them, I have got no answer for your question right now, I'll do some research, I'll get back to you. And since morning, I've been discussing about those topics with my team members and learning new things. So it's a continuous process. No one can ever be an expert for any particular thing. The world is changing, new things are coming, and we should be ready to learn new things. And that is the only way a person can sustain in any of the domain, whether you're doing a job, whether you are having your own startup, or whether you're a student studying in a university. This principle is same for everyone. Keep learning things every day.
Yeah, I know when I see a lot of TED talks from the scientists of ISRO, right? They are indulged in this field for quite a while now. It can be, I can just say that my age is their experience. That's the amount of work which they have put in order to get to that stage, and on that stage be that rock star on the TEDx talk, where I intend to see 10 times, 20 times of the same TED talks to understand the insights of how they solve the problem. But there is a lot of complexity involved in a spaceship. I just want to ask you this one question: is it a new level of complexity that a spaceship has over the self-driving car? And also I want you to give the view on the algorithms which are being mixed matched with different fields. Space algorithms are working in medical domain today. Medical domain algorithms are not working, but space algorithms are working today. And there are a lot and lot of research which is put in day and night in order to get to this point. What's that one thing which is actually driving this industry, and that thrill which has really induced in all of you in the community to work day and night to just solve the problem of space?
Yeah. So the thing is, like, this is a hype which is created by people that space is very difficult, and like we have heard this, phrase many times that our teachers used to say that there is no rocket science in this. That means it's easy. So now, from our childhood only, we think that rocket science is very difficult. It's the ultimate thing, but it is not the ultimate thing. A rocket consists of it's a multidisciplinary thing. It consists of various engineering. If you're good at mechanical, if you're good at electronics, at understanding the systems, it's just you combine them and you create a system which can fly. If you see a balloon, if you blow an air inside the balloon, if you leave it, what will happen? The balloon will start moving in one direction, and that is what happens with rockets, right? Because balloon is releasing air in one direction with such a high pressure, it creates a force on the balloon structure and pushes the balloon in the opposite direction. That is what happens in a rocket. A rocket is nothing but it's a hard balloon where you produce this gas with combining chemicals and by performing a combustion, and those gases are released in one direction. That is why it is moving in the opposite direction. It's just a simple system, right? It's just that we have to keep human safety and we have to guide the rocket in the right direction so that it reaches to the right space. There are some complexity, but that can be solved by a very common engineering thing. It's a common engineering problem. It's not nothing an advanced one. So it's not a difficult thing. The second crucial thing is the amount that we need to build it, like financials. Because a rocket have got so many components, they're expensive. They're really expensive. And that is why the people have got very limited resource to build them. I always say that log ye sochte, the people think that just because rockets are complex, less people are working on them. But the fact is, just because less people are working on rockets, the rockets are still complex and difficult. When more and more people start working on a technology, it becomes easier because everyone will face one single challenge and they'll solve it. And in the end, you'll get a standard design. Right now, talking about cars, this is a very, like what I say, it's a meme content for a lot of people because people used to say we'll have the flying cars by 2020, and you can see what's happening with the cars right now. The fact is, if you just see how many rockets are launched every day, like if you have got a number, then the number will be one or two maximum. But you can see how many people live in a city, and everyone have got, like when you drive a car, you're just moving in one plane. But if you're flying a car, you will move in different planes now, right? And that the chances of accidents increases because we are like Earth is populated, right, in comparison to the space. So in that case, the safety is something which is to be kept in mind and which is a very important thing. And that is why flying cars are not still there in the market. Like conceptually there are a lot of companies that have built them, but no commercial flying cars are there. It will take a lot of time. We have to redefine all safety protocols, everything like based licensing and each and everything for flying cars. So it will take a lot of time.
Yeah, there is a lot of things where it has been termed as $1 million question in space. What's that $1 million question which is supposed to be answered today but not yet answered? What's that? What are those actually?
So I'll answer this two things. Wait, I'll divide into three. One is going to be for future, one is going to be for the past, and third one is going for the students. And that is what I call the $1 million question. Okay, so first $1 million question about the past is going to be, what was there before Big Bang, or just before the quantum fields were there? So we know that quantum fields were the fundamental which were there right when the Big Bang happened. There was a inflammation, and then it was like 10 to minus 32 seconds something time, and in that everything was formed. But what was there before that, no one knows, and that is always going to be a very big question for astrophysicists and particle physicists to discover, and it's going to be a very big challenge. So if someone can come up with a theory which cannot directly answer 100%, it cannot be a 100% answer to that question, but at least some person closer to what was there before, it will be a very good thing. The second thing is going to be, what are the different opportunities for a human to expand humanity in different planets? Like we have got Mars, we have got Moon as other option, then Titan is considered to be one of the options in future. But the real question is, which is an actual option for human to sustain or to build a civilization there? So that is one we have to figure out. Mars is very close. Like if a very strong solar radiation is striking Earth, there are chances that it will also reach to the Mars someday, right? So the thing is, we need to have a place where humans are safe and they can sustain themselves. Third $1 million question that I always, tell students to ask themselves is, whenever we see Facebook, we remember Mark Zuckerberg. Whenever we see Microsoft, we remember Bill Gates. Whenever we see missiles, we remember Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam sir. Every student should ask themselves one question, that what they will be remembered for, right? When you get the answer that when you what you will be remembered for, you'll figure out what you're passionate about, and then you'll start working in that direction. So that is very much important.
Yeah, talking about the passion, everything has driven you crazy about the space, and that's the influence which we have for the youth of the country. I'm not joking, because when I tell Sunny Kabrawala in my college, the space team which I was working part of, they literally says he's just going to try not to just make the space accessible. He's just going to give that knowledge that everybody would need. It's just like that poem that an LKG student learns, kind of an comparison that they give. But as an engineer, you've been giving a lot of approaches to the problem statement. How to approach a problem statement in order to give that most desired solution that you want. Because we as a student, when we enter the space tech, let it be a student sat or any project which we are trying to do, we feel it's much more complex. We need a lot of insights in order to gain that actual experience of working there. But we are young folks, but we don't have that experience. But what's the thought process which we should be processing in order to solve this problem statement? What's that you have in your life, and how has it really made that influence in your life today?
So two fundamentals I already shared. The one is to keep things very much simple. Whenever you're working on any problem, keep things simple. Don't try to complicate things. Understand the problem statement very well, right? And that is what doctors do. Like, when you go to a doctor, you talk about the symptoms that you have got. They ask you many questions, that what happens to you when you're sleeping? What happens to you when you eat this thing, right? And they'll try to understand the problem. They'll find out a pattern, and understanding the pattern is very important. So a good doctor is not a person who recommends you the right medicine every time. With a good doctor is a person who first identify the right problem in you, and then based on that, giving medicines become easier. So in engineering is all about finding problems and then giving a right solution for it. Okay. And I've come across the students who always come up with a very complex solution. It's not necessary. Like innovation doesn't mean that you need to have machines. Innovation means if you simplify things and like connect two different ideas, that is also what we can call innovation, right? So it's not always about building things which have got an Android app, or which have got something to do with softwares. Not every time, right? So come up with the easiest solution which is user friendly and which can make things faster and easier for someone. Second one, as I already mentioned, be very strong with the fundamental and the basics. You need to understand. If someone asks me how a rocket works, if I tell him that rocket have got these subsystems and they work like this, the person won't be interested in knowing that. If I tell them, if I give the comparison of a rocket with a balloon, they'll be able to understand. Students will be able to visualize that if I blow air inside the balloon, if I leave it, balloon will fly, and that is how rocket flies, right? So things become easier when you go through the basics and the fundamentals. Third is, I'll give one more analogy, that is, if you have to travel from Surat to Ahmedabad, it's 400 kilometers, and if your journey is if you're traveling during night time, you have to know the whole path, your road, right? Your headlights, the light will not be there for 400 kilometers. Your headlight will have the area of something around 2 to 3 kilometer only, but still you complete the whole journey. Why? Because your whole journey is now divided into small steps. While traveling, if you feel that there are some roadblocks, what you'll do is you'll change your path, right? So the thing is, you have to divide your end goal into small goals. If you feel that something, like if you feel that you are facing a very severe challenge right now, you can now think of solving it or changing the whole process that you're working on. It completely depends on the team to take that decision of waiting or uh, for a right solution for the problem, or to directly change the process. Both works most of the times. And then you'll figure out that at every step you'll figure out that how much close you are towards to the end goal that you want to achieve, right? So while working on any projects, be very much good at figuring out the problems. And if you might have seen, the people who are called experts of the any industry, just by looking at the product design, they figure out what are going to be the loopholes in the product. And that happens because they have got enough of their data in their mind based on their previous experiences. So when you work on a project for a very long period of time, or many a times, you become an expert for that particular thing. Again, I'm repeating, you become an expert for that particular thing, not for everything, right? So that is important again. So in that case, you can give, like, if someone makes a model rocket, if they give it to me, if I hold it, from by just holding, I can figure out whether it is going to be stable or not. So that is because we have worked a lot on model rockets and high power rockets before. But if I have to see a launch vehicle, I cannot predict what is going to be wrong with this launch vehicle, because I have never worked on launch vehicles much, right? So the thing is, uh, we have to work on systems. We have to face those challenges. Then and then only you'll become expert. It's not that you work and you achieve it in the very first time, you'll be an expert. You have to face loopholes and the challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, Elon Musk and his space craziness has really fascinated the world. Even a small child, even today, he says Elon Musk means SpaceX. He has faced a lot of failures and he has gained a lot of experience through that, because he himself told her, because I could not get a right chief engineer, I had to become the right chief engineer. And now I had to face these failures in order to get that experience. Now, leaving that, comment on it also, even because he's in OpenAI, is also in Tesla, self-driving car, lot of things. I just want you to comment on that, and I also want you to give this opinion on what led to this multidisciplinary workforce in the space industry. Let it be like Aryabhatta was being launched. It was just in stack of solar panels and some space components, mechanical systems. Basically, mechanical systems were being deployed there. And today there's an apogee boost motor, which is like ion thrusters, which is filled with gas, and which is there. Goki is there, observing the gravitation of the earth just by the three axes. There's a lot of things which multidisciplinary has really influenced the space industry. What do you feel about that space craziness that Elon Musk has put in everybody, and also that workforce or the workflow which has led that space industry?
Elon Musk is a crazy person who believes in pushing the limits of humanity. He never like, he's one of the people who are not comfortable with the things which are there in the world. He always feel that we can make things like more sustainable, whether it's a technology, whether it's the earth itself. We have to make it more sustainable. A lot of people, they think that Elon Musk is sending rockets to space and polluting earth. They're not able to understand what he's working for. He's not just a space passionate person, but he's someone, if you see all his ventures, they are for sustain to sustain the resources which we have got on earth. So it's focusing on sustainability much, right? He's not just a person who's just passionate about space. He's passionate about sustainability. And about the this multidisciplinary thing. Before we used the gyro mechanisms to stabilize the rockets, and now we have got gyroscope sensors, which are very small sensors. Based on that, we do thrust vector controlling to stabilize the rockets, right? The thing is, humans and these innovations are driven by the people who are not comfortable with the things which are going on right now, or the people who are not habituated with the thing. I saw a TED talk in which an Apple employee said that that person, he told his daughter to go and check the mailbox, that whether there was a letter or any bill or anything there in mailbox or not. So his daughter, she was very young, and she told that, Dad, why I have to go there to check the mailbox? Why can't mailbox tell us what is there inside it? So now why that girl was able to think about that particular idea, because she was not habituated with that process of going to the mailbox and checking by opening it and checking it. But that older person was habituated with the process. So young people are not habituated with the processes which are built by the previous generations. So they always tend to do something which can bring innovation. And that is why I always say a company should have a combination of experienced people and freshers. If you do have only experienced people, you will be always driven by the traditional things which are going on. And if you only have the freshers, you'll end up repeating the mistakes that previous generation have done. Experienced people will tell you what are the mistakes they made, and that will help you in avoid making mistakes that they did. You can try making new mistakes. I won't say that avoid making mistakes, but you can make new mistakes to come up with the new ideas. And freshers, they always come up with new concepts. And that is why when a new fresher joins the company, they always tell to their head of department or their boss that uh, can we do this, can we make some modification in our process, because in this way we can do it better. So the thing is, they always look for a change, and that is why this major change happened, where now space is a multidisciplinary thing, where we have got the need of mechanic. Now also civil engineers have got a good scope, architects have also good scope of building domes on Mars, on moon as well, by understanding the soil, the composition of soil there, by understanding the gravity. Biologists have got a good scope there, because they have to understand that the what will be the length of the plant that will grow on Mars, on moon, because we have got less gravity, right? So we have to think of a lot of things, and that is why now space is open for everyone.
The space be open for everybody because we need a lot of people to give us that sustainable process in order to make our lives much more easier in the future. But I just want to ask you this one question: who or which, as an organism or a living entity, is the most intelligent on this universe? Who or which living or the non-living entity is the most intelligent entity on this planet? Because we see Earth, there are tectonic plates which have been just moving, because that was the one which causes the earthquake, because we never saw an earthquake that consistent. We are consistently being disrupted by the nature because we are disturbing it in some or the other way. Nature is intelligent, but I just want you to give that one organism or one living or a non-living entity which can really survive no matter what, whether the big bang happens, theory happens twice, thrice, or anything, but this will still survive in terms of evolution or anything, because this is the one which has led human beings to be what human beings are today, because we are evolving a day, but we are not strong enough because we are not fit enough to be the fittest survivor. Who is that? Any organism that you have really come across, because space technology has been that accessible, but not that information of who can be the fittest survivor. Who is that?
So, to answer this, for I answer this in two different parts. One is going to be like natural intelligence to just sustain itself on the planet, and the second is going to be to sustain in all the hazardous situations, which can be space, which can be anything, a hot surface or a very cold planet, anything. So first thing is, it's very difficult to answer what is which is the smartest or the most intelligent species on the earth right now, because if you are a human, like if I tell you, without using any technology, you have to travel from Australia to Surat, it's going to be difficult for you. But birds, they travel from Australia to Surat, that is a place where I live, without any technology, and they always visit Surat in winter. Now, how do they travel? They are sensitive to the magnetic field of the Earth, and based on that, they navigate. So every species have got their own ability to feel and to sense the different parameters which we have got. It is considered that rabbits can predict earthquake, before humans, and they can feel earthquake before us. Now we have built no technology we can sense that thing yet, but rabbits can do it. They can sense earthquakes before us. So the thing is, everyone have got their own ability to do a perform a task, and it has been just because of evolution that have taken place since millions of years, and because of that evolution only they are in the way they are right now, right? So it's not valid to compare intelligence of these things, but because humans are able to understand the intelligence of others, we can call ourselves intelligent. But there is a difference between being intelligent and being wise. Okay, being intelligent means having knowledge and having information, but being wise is how to use that knowledge or information, and that is where most of humans are still lacking in, right? The second part is any organism which can sustain itself in all the conditions that are called extremophiles. Now these extremophiles are found, but we're still not so sure that they will be able to sustain a very difficult situation where like forget about big bang, but something like gravity of the black hole or the radiations which are there near the black hole. Not so sure about those things, but extremophiles can sustain on different planets which are there on in our solar system, and that is why all the satellites, everything is built in a clean room where they consider that these extremophiles should not enter, because if they are there on the rover, if they go to Mars, the extremophiles will be there on Mars, they'll reproduce themselves there, and then you won't be able to figure out whether these extremophiles they came from Earth, these bacteria they came from Earth, or whether they were there already on Mars. So extremophiles, they are kind of bacteria which can sustain themselves and reproduce themselves in a very difficult condition. It can be Moon, Mars, and even in normal space at a very low temperature.
Yeah, that's a valid answer because we are trying to build that superhuman who can really stay on any planet, whether there is an oxygen, whether there's a carbon dioxide, anything. They are supposed to be built for surviving. Humans are trying to do that, inducing some sort of an medicine or some sort of an research which is going on. But like,
Correct.
what's that? I just want you to go to that old school back once again. Because I just want this question to be answered. Because what would a world experience without Voyager 1 and Voyager 2? I'm talking about Earth, which which where we launched the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. Scientists have told that they have used the gravitation force of different planets which for maneuvering it. It was 6 burn, 8 burn, 12 burn, lot number of burns of maneuvers which just went in order to move that Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 to this Kuiper belt. There's a lot of things involved. What would a world experience without these satellites being launched?
So the thing is, I read somewhere that a person was asked that, like, why humans built the aircrafts. It was not just to fly, but it was to prove that humans have got the ability to fly. So the thing is, a lot of missions like Voyager, and they are science exploration based mission. They have got a purpose of figuring out, the compositions of the planets and understanding the gravity and other things. But if you see other side of these mission, the main purpose of this mission is to inspire the next generation and to come up with new techniques. As you mentioned about the slingshot methods that they use to travel to the Kuiper belt, and they use the gravity of the Jupiter, Saturn, and other planets to reach to that point, right? The second thing is uh, the communication part. That system is still able to communicate from that particular location to Earth, right? I was able to communicate for a very long period of time. Just imagine, it takes a lot of time for a signal to travel from Mars to Earth, and this was at a very far distance. So it took almost, like more than 50 or 100 times the time taken by a signal from to reach from Mars to Earth. So at that point, what things can go wrong, and how can you trust your systems and the things that you have built there? that is what it taught us. And the third was, uh, that is what I consider to be one of the most inspiring thing, that is, it inspired the future generation by showing the capability of humans. If someone asks me whether Chandrayaan 2 was successful or not, I always say it was a super successful mission. Chandrayaan 2 didn't land, Vikram didn't land on moon, but still every Indian, most of the Indians were awake till midnight to watch it live, landing live. Second, it never happened before. Indians, watching something live based on science thing, like they were like, if there is a World Cup, cricket World Cup, we stay awake. But still, about for the space missions, we never saw Indians too much excited. Second, after the failures, Indians were not criticizing ISRO. They stood with ISRO, they congratulated them for their efforts, and they wished them all luck for the next mission with all the enthusiasm they had, right? So that was that. Our nation have the ability to and to stand with each other when science fails, right? Third thing is, other countries, they also helped us in figuring out what went wrong. So that brought all the nations together, right? Fourth, every student after that mission started talking about an orbiter, about a lander, about the rovers. No one was aware about these things before. And even parents, they started talking about that. And we used to get calls that, do you teach rover technology to students? And that is how we figured out that this mission have really created that impact of building the next generation. So Chandrayaan 2 is kind of an Apollo for India. After Apollo, American space community got scaled up and Chandrayaan 2 did that. The thing is, we don't have enough communities and companies in India to maintain that enthusiasm. So, for example, if you get passionate about something right now, but what if you don't get any opportunity in that particular domain for 6 months? Your passion for that will get degraded, and then you won't think of that in future, right? And some similar thing happened. Like everyone was passionate about moon and other things when Chandrayaan have to happen. But after 6 months, very few people now are talking about that mission and the Chandrayaan 3, which is going to take place in 2021 or 2022. So thing is, we need more companies to maintain that, or more such missions, so that on a very a short duration, so that that enthusiasm can be maintained.
Yeah, when you told about the enthusiasm which has to be maintained, even when you heard of people calling you, do you teach rover technology, all these things would have had led to a new disruption, obviously, because India was never that excited about the space machine. When Aryabhat, I heard this news when Aryabhatta one, or I don't know, that satellite, when it got a failure, ISRO was being criticized to an extent where they even thought we will never get funded for any of the future machines. That's how space technology was influential in India. But like, there is a self-driving car. Forget the flying cars, everything. But there is self-driving car which has a self-driving hardware which is being designed for that purpose. Nvidia has come out with the AGX card. FSD computers are from the Tesla. Waymo is coming out with its own architecture for the self-driving car. Do you really think so that space requires its own hardware? And I also want you to answer this one question: which is hard, software or the hardware? That's what this entire talk will always be about. Because I'm an EC engineer, I'll always be more towards inclined more towards the hardware.
Yes, so the answer for this is going to be really tough, because both have their own complexity. One have got, a complexity of, like, if you talk about softwares, you have got a set of bugs which you can solve, which you can rely on, and softwares can be 100% simulated on Earth. Difficult to simulate in hardware, with all, considering all the constraints which will be there in space. So hardware is going to be difficult, and you have got a lot of losses in hardware which not always can be, you know simulated. Like, for example, if I tell you that at some point your rocket is going to experience maximum q, that is maximum aerodynamic pressure, max q, and this is x amount of stress that your rocket can withstand. So based on that value, what you'll do is you'll keep a margin, extra margin, so you will give 1.5 times or 2 times strength to the rocket, right? Now, because of that extra strength, your rocket weight will increase, and that will further increase the complexity and the mission budget. In softwares, you have got no such issues. Softwares can be implemented on Earth, they can be tested multiple times, and you can rely on the softwares every time. And they're not even so expensive, right? But hardwares are expensive. Chances of failure in hardware is more, and that is why we have got a technology called system defined radio, SDRs. So SDR is going to be like a software version of a complete hardware. In that case, the error chances will be less, and losses will be less. The cost of the product will be less, and you will be dealing with less hardware. So I'm always biased about, or biased for the softwares and not the hardwares. I like to work on both of them. I like to work on hardware more, but hardware have got more complexity than the software, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, leaving the radiation hardened components, like, do you really feel that there is a requirement of space hardware particularly? There are Jetson Nano, which is available for satellite systems, like, initially just for deployment. Some space scientists even say, even if the component just goes and sits there, it's absolutely enough for us. But there are a lot of bit flips and a lot of problems which they can face. Do you really feel that there is a requirement of space hardware as in development, just like how Hardino is there, just like how
Yeah.
Raspberry Pis are there,
Yeah.
and also, is it really accessible? Is space really accessible today in terms of course, we can't launch the rockets, we can't bring the radars on the system without the license. But do you really feel so? Open source is actually giving a lot, but is it still accessible in terms of space
So
technology?
correct. So being anything like anything, if it is accessible, that doesn't mean that everyone will be doing it. So for example, if I have a glass of water on a table, and if you want, like if you're really thirsty, if you want to drink it, you have to take that effort of standing and picking the glass and to have the water, right? You don't expect anyone else to come and to give you the water at that time. In a similar way, the glass is going to be there for everyone, but it depends who is going to take that opportunity and who will make that efforts of taking the opportunity, right? In similar way, space is open for everyone, but again, there, like every companies have got a set of or a limited vacancies, limited opportunities for everyone, right? In that case, you need to figure out, are you active enough to grab that opportunity or not? If you don't, like if you fill up the form, like today was a deadline, and if you keep waiting and then you say that everyone used to say that space is for everyone, and today I'm not eligible to apply, why so? Now there are few criteria that one have to fulfill, and I'm not just setting a criteria based on your exam or your exam grades, but there are certain criteria. Like for example, if I meet you and you have made 15 rockets in your lifetime, and there is another person who have done nothing, but he just keep on telling that I am passionate about space. If he was really passionate about space, he could have done anything before. He might have at least made a small model rocket at his place, or at least learned about the rockets, right? So that is where you show, you don't tell a girl that I really love you every time. You actually love her, and that is how it care for her, and that is how you prove her that you really love her, right? So just by saying that you're passionate, that doesn't mean that space is going to be there for you, and opportunities is going to be there for you. You have to put their efforts. You have to be to prove yourself, like consistently, by working, by making small projects during your undergrad programs, by doing internships, by talking with your friends about space, by the possibilities, talking about the possibilities of the innovation which might happen, by publishing research papers, by having patents. Put some efforts in these things, and that is what is going to give you the end result, rather than just waiting for yourself being graduate and then going. Like the way you are doing right now, that you are doing a podcast series, which is an effort which will definitely have a very strong output in future as well, right? So we need people like you, young people who take such initiatives of using YouTube in a better way, social medias in a better way, inviting people. And in our country, no one is going to tell you no, right? Because me, I want to reach out to many students, you want to reach out to many students. The purpose is only to inspire them so that they start working not only in space domain, but at least in their domain, right? So that is one thing we need to understand. Now about coming back to the component parts, we have companies who manufacture these components which are there specifically for space. And there's a company named setsearch.co, run by Narayan Prasad. And he's like, his platform is like an Amazon for space products. You can find the space products there. And it's just that they're really expensive because the number of like anything, when you manufacture in a mass, the cost drop down. Right now the mass manufacturing is not seen in this industry at such big scale. The cost is really high for that. But universities have got funding programs, and there are startup communities who are helping by providing the investment or the small amount of fund which you can buy, and you can do that experiments. As I already mentioned about a company which have got a satellite in space, you can program it right from the earth and you can experiment out. So you have got no excuse right now for not trying out anything in this domain, right? So before like few years, people had excuse that it will take a lot of money, but now you need just few $100. Like the one orbit costs $100 right now. The company name is Exodus Orbitals, and by just in $100 you'll be able to experiment or try out your software in space without having an actual hardware, right? So thing is, there are no more excuse now. Like if you're really passionate, if you really have a strong purpose, you'll work in this industry. And once more people will start working in this domain, mass manufacturing will be there, and the the rates will drop down.
You talked about the quantum mechanics and lot of things, quantum physics and particle physics, not the quantum mechanics. Sorry for that. You know, there is a lot of ways in which quantum people have put this craziness of predicting the future, predicting the event, and they have also given answers to those also. They have put the question, but they have also answered those in the form of math, the form of theories. Will it just given hope on the earth, like explore exoplanets, exploring the planet's capability, and also aliens invading the other species, which are quantum as answer to everything. People are working on it. What's your view on these kind of craziness, the non-space sense, or the non or these people are actually against the people who are working on the space? They call it space nonsense kind of a thing, because they say that I can prove it with the mathematical equations. Why to just spend money there and just go? Kind of, what's your view on these technology giving that potential of exploring exoplanets, alien invasion, UFOs, or anything? What's that influence they can? That's my question.
Yep. Okay. So the thing is, astrophysicists and the particle physicists and even who are into quantum mechanics, they all are very strong at equations. They are very strong at understanding and making mathematical models of the actual things which are there or which can be there in future as well. They have got equations for everything. But the only problem is, like, if you talk about gravitational waves which were discovered in 2016, which were predicted by Albert Einstein in 1916, and Einstein already gave equation, and general theory of relativity is based on that particular thing. Now, when anything is proved theoretically, you have to have a very strong proof that whether it will work in our universe or not. Like, right? You have applied your physics there, it's fine, but you need to figure out, and for that you need engineering. You needed to build a LIGO detector, which is nothing but a piece of engineering right now, right? So after that, it was practically proved that gravitational waves exist in this world. And now we have to take a step further. By just discovering something is not going to help humans, but how to use your discovery in for the future technology is going to be a very important thing. So if, for example, this gravitational waves can travel from one galaxy to another galaxy as well. And now what if you can superimpose your electromagnetic field with this gravitational waves, and now your electromagnetic signals, like radio signals, can travel to different galaxies. So when you figure out what is there in practical world, you'll be able to find out how can you use it for the future missions. And that is how, like, imagine if you have got laser based communication, and you know that space time fabric, it bends, and it results into gravitational lensing. And imagine that your satellite is right now behind a very heavy planet, and excuse me, and you have got that planet in between Earth and the satellite. So your antenna will not be able to face towards Earth, and you won't have communication, and that is what we call eclipse period. What if you have got a laser communication, and your laser can bend and it can reach to the satellite? Just an idea, and hypothetical thing I'm telling right now. It's not done right now, right? Just an idea. So when you come up with such crazy things in your mind, whether it's possible or not, it's a secondary thing. at least you come up with an idea and then you implement it. So using gravitational lensing for laser based communication, using gravitational waves for intergalactic thing. I know, like you might be thinking I am a crazy person for thinking such things right now, and I like even I feel that I'm telling saying anything which is coming into mind. But who knows in future if it is possible or something related to this is possible, right? So we need, like, this generation need to think, you know, beyond the limits, and they have to merge different ideas to come up with the solution for the future engineering.
Yeah, I know. Uh, Sorry for asking that as the last question, but I just want to ask you this books and the recommendations which new people who are entering this industry needs to study this. Are there any books or any research papers or anything which you would really love to say in like short span of time, so that they can really get that actual interest of what space technology is all about? That one thing,
To be
if
honest,
it's
I don't read books, but I watch a lot of YouTube videos. So
your TEDx also has a lot of YouTube videos which has been given out.
yes, so the thing is, like, I just watch YouTube videos. Like there are a few YouTubers like Simon Sinek. We have got good person like Simon Sinek for business, especially the working culture. He's a right person who can teach you how to maintain a good culture at the work. Then the other YouTubers are there who have got a good content for science and engineering, and that is what I keep on watching during my free time. And but I don't read books. I read a lot of research papers at my home. So what I do is I download research papers, I go through them. I like reading equations and going through the equations, understand. I don't like to write equations, but I understand equations well. So I read a lot of research papers, but I don't read books. I don't know why, but research papers are fun because they show that why a system is like this and why it is not like something else. So that is why research papers are always fun.
No, I do read a lot of research paper. Archive is like my daily newspaper. I just read a lot of new research papers, and also I also on Twitter, so a lot of research paper just keeps popping in and out of the Twitter. Thank you
Correct.
so
Yes.
much, Sunny Kabarwala sir, for this amazing podcast. I think a lot of new things which a beginner needs can be addressed through this podcast, and I feel so that my dream of doing a podcast with you has been completed. My bucket list is almost full. There are a lot of other people whom I have put in this list, and I will be doing it. And thank you so much for this amazing podcast.
I'm overwhelmed right now, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I wish you all the best for your future podcast as well. Anytime you need help, any help, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you once again for the wonderful opportunity. I really enjoyed this. This was like the best way to start the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.